I'm Amber.
And I'm Athena, and welcome to our channel, Ex-Wives Undercover. Have you found yourself questioning the person you're dating, getting to know, or even married to? If you said yes, well, my friend, you have come to the right place. Join us each episode where we discuss the ins and outs of love gone wrong and love gone right. We will also be welcoming special guests to join us as we discuss trending hot topics in the media, share our listeners' dating disaster stories, and much, much more. So make sure you hit that subscribe button because you are not going to want to miss this.
So, first of all, thank you again for joining us for season 5. The reason we thought we'd do this is that just getting feedback from our listeners is it's great to listen to these stories, but we also want some professional feedback on what we can learn from these ladies' experiences. It's great just to feel like, oh, we're not alone, but at the same time, picking it apart and saying why this happened or kind of taking little nuggets of, professional opinion. And I saw, I think, Irina, it was you on a private Facebook group, and I kind of stalked you a little bit and was like, hey. And I moved over on Instagram and sent you a message. So you probably thought I was a complete weirdo reaching out, but I think there's some
No,
good
I'm glad you did.
synergies. Yay. So why don't you guys introduce yourselves and your podcast, and then we'll just jump into some questions. Whoever wants to go first. Yeah.
I'll start, I guess. I am Irina Manta. I'm a professor of law at the Maurice A. Dean School of Law at Hofstra University. And our podcast is Strangers on the Internet, where we talk about all things dating, dating apps, and relationships. And all of our platforms are available at strangersoninternet.com. Just strangersoninternet.com. If you hit the follow button, you can get all of our platforms.
And we will link it out as well to the podcast. And Michelle.
I'm Michelle Lang. I am a senior lecturer of clinical psychology at Christopher Newport University in Virginia. And I'm a therapist in private practice. I've been in private practice for a long time, or in group practice, but I just officially launched my own new practice. So it's relaxion.us if anyone wants to learn any about me and what I'm doing.
Oh, that's so cool. Yay. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So cool. Well, you guys, so this is the first story. This is Elvi. She's going by Elvi, and La Petite Douche. You like that one?
Love that.
Yeah, we always kind of choose some kind of crazy name for the guy. But so this is our first season of having kind of experts on. So with Elvi, she actually had a great, growing up experience with her parents who were immigrants, but still married. Everything's great. Her first boyfriend was good. And then she got married, which lasted 13 years, and he was an alcoholic. So after 13 years, she jumped out of that situation, and right away she gets on the dating apps, right? Because that's what's out there right now. And she figured out that a lot of people were not honest or lying about who they are or married, the whole deal. So I wanted to get your guys' opinions on how prevalent it is that men or women lie about who they are on dating apps.
Unfortunately, it's very prevalent. So while we don't have the exact figures, some surveys suggest that it may be as many as 80% of people who lie on dating apps, believe it or not. Now, some of the time, in fact, much of the time, the lies are about insignificant things or fairly insignificant things, like people add an inch to their height or something like that, right? So that's not really what we tend to be worried about. What's more important, though, is finding ways to spot lies that are significant, especially the ones where you wouldn't necessarily figure it out just upon meeting the person. So you meet someone and you don't necessarily know if they're married just by looking at them because they probably took off their wedding band, right? So that tends to be the kind of stuff people are worried about, or more dramatically, people's like criminal backgrounds and things like that.
So this one has a few different sections. So is there anything in particular that is a dead giveaway in a dating profile that would help spot a catfish or just general lying?
There are quite a few signs to look out for. So I'm going to mention some of them. we talk about it more at our podcast. But one is, does the person look like a model? Perhaps a bit too good to be true. So that's why it's important to do a reverse image search on Google to see if maybe those images were taken from like a famous or semi-famous person's Instagram or something like that. Another sign is ostentatious displays of wealth on dating profiles. So those are often part of either some kind of catfishing for just regular dating purposes, but also for romance scams, which are, the financial scams where people get exploited in all sorts of ways, as you're well familiar. So if you see these pictures in private jets or with expensive cars, anyone who's watched a Tinder swindler remembers what some of those looked like. So some of these things could be a Photoshop job, or there are also companies that actually specialize in photo shoots to make people seem rich. Right, so that's something to be aware of. I would personally also swipe left on any profile that doesn't show a person's face clearly or sometimes at all. Sometimes people will say like, oh, it's for privacy reasons or it's for professional reasons. Yeah, no, like that's usually going to be a lie. And so it's not worth taking the risk. Another one is, do the images look too different from each other? Like they were taken at totally different ages, or that they could literally be two different people? That's super suspicious. One more that I want to mention is, check if the years sort of don't line up with the life story the person is telling. So somebody claiming that they're a neurosurgeon at 26 or something of that sort. So sometimes these are the tells that there is a lot of lying involved here.
Oh my gosh, that's so true. Or I noticed too, if they just have one picture and they're a model, right? Like they're just, wow, you're in your 40s. You don't look like you're older than 25 or 30. It's just insane. What do you think about, sorry, this is totally off the list, but what do you think about asking them to do a video chat right away? Would that be like something that you could kind of discern really quickly, whether they're lying, if they're kind of avoiding getting on a video chat, or, dancing around, getting on a phone call or something like that?
We do know that some liars, especially when it comes to the people involved in those financial scams, that those are often not going to want to get on a video chat. Now, some are sophisticated enough that they're going to find ways to maybe even fake the video chat or something like that. But the main thing I would be worried about in terms of video chatting is that some people will unfortunately take that as an opportunity for lewd behavior. And so that's going to be a downside of saying, oh, let's video chat right away, right? So then that's going to be something that unfortunately you're going to have to be prepared for, and then you might want to report it if it does happen. But that's a reason that I maybe wouldn't necessarily immediately say, like, let's video chat, like the first second you start talking. But at some point, I think, especially these days with everybody really being used to Zoom technology, et cetera, at this point, like for your first date to be a Zoom date, I think is completely reasonable for many different reasons, including the one that you mentioned about not being able to fake your identity as easily.
Yeah.
And I would add in there too, if they do want to do a video chat, I would suggest doing it from within the app so that you're not giving away any other way of knowing how to identify or contact you.
That's really smart. I've actually heard some women say they create like a Google phone number and use that. So either chatting within, like don't move out onto WhatsApp or all those things that they want to move you into, like you said, like stay on the app or use something that's not your phone number. You know what I mean? Like, so if it's a Google phone number or something else, yeah, because they can definitely, if they're strange or not safe to be around. And on that topic of safety, so when I joined, obviously right out of the get-go, it was when Tinder first came out and I met my ex-husband. So total fraud, didn't know anything about dating apps. They were brand new. I don't even think Match.com was an app yet at that point. It was like so new, and Bumble wasn't around, and Hinge, none of those even existed. So it did not even like enter my brain that people could be lying about who they are, because I'm an honest person, right? So as the years have gone by, do you feel like the dating app industry is trying to protect women? Is there anything that they're implementing? I even heard something about the other day, like catfish, for instance. They can go in, get verified, and then they go and change their picture. So, yeah. I mean, I know it's probably not in the industry's best interest, but there's got to be some pressure, I would think, that people are fed up with it.
There has been some pressure coming from the press, especially. So after ProPublica published a couple of big articles in the last few years that showed just how much violence results from some of these dating app encounters, et cetera. And we also see some of this in Australia, where ABC did a big investigation there about rape related to dating apps. Like, there was some pressure. So we're seeing some signs, but perhaps not enough. For one, the apps have become more willing to kick people out, it seems, like after there's been a report of an offense or something. However, sometimes that is turned against innocent women who are reported after they essentially refused to go out with someone, or maybe they were taken aback by an overly sexual or other rude remark or behavior. So that's kind of a two-edged sword, right? Like, if they're just sort of kicking people out indiscriminately, that can become a problem also. Another thing that has happened is, for example, Tinder partnered with a company named Garbo to make getting background checks easier for users. So they said, like, you get 2 free background checks, and then you pay like a couple of dollars each to do more than that. And we're going to have to see how that plays out. But there's definitely a long way to go, in part because dating app companies don't want to have to expend money or other resources if they feel like they legally don't have to. And they also don't necessarily want to admit that there is a danger, right? So if they put a lot of safety precautions in place, people are like, whoa, like, is there something to be worried about? So that could be bad for business. And I think that's another reason why we're not seeing as much as maybe we would like to.
It's crazy.
Yeah, I would add in there that we interviewed Nancy Jo Sales, who is an author, and she also, I guess, produced I'm not sure if that's her title, but the documentary Swiped, about these dating apps and the nature of them. And, you know, as she points out, and as you alluded to too, Amber, they are a business. And in fact, their business benefits the longer we stay on them. They don't actually want you to find love, because, or at least not long lasting love, because then you're going to stay off the apps. And so, and also many of them are owned by the same conglomerate, the Match Group. And so they are a publicly traded company. So at the end of the day, they're going to do what is best for their stockholders and for making money. And so they aren't proactively motivated to do something to promote safety on the apps. They only will do so if there is enough negative pushback. And I think it's really important for people to understand they're looking for you to have a good time and to enjoy using their apps, but they want you coming back. And so they will not make proactive steps. They're only going to do it if there is enough negative pushback against what they're doing. And, you know, Irina, as you talked about with Tinder partnering with Garbo to make background checks easier, at the same time, Tinder is the one who I have heard about the most, like the most commonly cited offender for what you said about banning people without recourse, and that some daters have figured out you can do that. You can get somebody banned to punish them for rejecting you. And so then what happens is the person who's offended that you rejected them can report you to whatever app it is. And then the person who gets banned just gets told you're banned. There's not an avenue for recourse. They aren't even told what they were banned for. They don't know what was alleged against them. And so, you know, I do get it from the stance of that to do so would create extra moderation work for the company, but to know that that function is being done to abuse people, it does seem like the dating apps should be more thoughtful in how they decide to implement those bans. Because it's good that they're there for safety if somebody really is behaving in inappropriate ways on the app. But if abusive people are just going to use that as yet another way to abuse somebody who rejected them, it's just perpetuating problem in dating, which we would not like to think that the apps are perpetuating.
Such a good point. I remember after I divorced my ex-husband, there was a few of the girlfriends that reported him because he was on Bumble, faking who he was. But honestly, I don't think they asked them for any evidence or proof. You know, we had case numbers and everything, but I honestly don't think that they even did any due diligence. So like you said, like you could report anyone. So it could be just as innocent, like I'm not interested and this person was mad and you're off for good. And then even guys like my ex, like he would just create another email address and sign up again. He would just, there's a easy workaround and no one's monitoring it at all, So there's just so much more that needs to be done. But thankfully, us women like to talk. And so the more, we're chatting on podcasts and having articles written and getting the exposure, I mean, no one wants bad PR for sure. I mean, maybe they don't care. Maybe bad PR is fine for them. But I would think that they would kind of, want to steer clear of anything too bad happening.
On that point, I was going to say, and then this also goes along with what Michelle was saying, right? Like, I think they're basically trying to find the quote unquote sweet spot in terms of we're going to do just enough that people feel safe on the platform, or at least feel like we're doing something, even if it's performative. And we're going to do just enough that you have a good time and find decent matches on here, but we don't necessarily want you, like Michelle said, we don't necessarily want you to wander off with someone and then never come back to the apps, right? So it's this kind of sometimes inconsistent reinforcement, right, which can be especially attractive to people, right, can work especially well. And I mean, it's tricky. And at the same time, the apps know very well that they've created a universe where it's pretty difficult sometimes, and especially depending on where you live, to find people to date outside of the apps. So people often feel stuck, right? Because it's like they want to date and this is as good as it gets. So what can we do? I mean, look, I've argued in some of my work that when it comes to some types of offenses, criminal law offenses and tortious offenses, that we're going to need the law to intervene, right? But we're not there yet, unfortunately, with some of this. And sometimes even the laws on the books don't get enforced, as you well know. So it's going to take more than writing up the right words and putting them in place.
Yeah. And I get that it's kind of uncharted territory. Probably, the people that came up with these app ideas, it sounded fantastic, but as you go along and people are saying, hey, this is a problem, like they need to have this open-mindedness about fixing what's not working and not pushing back, or it's hurting my business and blah, blah, blah. Like you said, it's a fine balance between, being a profitable business. We get that, but also, you got to have the backs of people that are using your apps as well. My last question on this topic is there one that stands out that's doing a better job than the others? I know you had mentioned Tinder kind of being the one that you hear about the most. Is there one that is doing a better job than the others, or are they all kind of equally crap? Without a better word to describe it, but
this tends to be in flux, right? And so depending on when people hear us talking about this, it might have already changed because these things are happening so quickly. I will say that some apps have a worse reputation than others when it comes to safety issues and when it comes to preserving the data of their users. For example, Grindr has gotten itself into the news quite a bit with that sort of thing. So that's disconcerting. One clear dividing line is whether a service says that they do background checks on all of their users or not. And the major apps generally don't do that, right? So the real distinctions here are really going to be between the services that unfortunately do tend to be a lot more expensive, that where you sign up, whether we're talking about a website or we're talking about a matchmaking agency of some sort. And the safety there might be better. Now, whether it's going to be a good match or not, you hear all sorts of things from people. Like sometimes it's better, sometimes it's exactly the same people you would have met on the apps, right? And then people are like, why did I spend thousands of dollars on this? But as far as safety is concerned, certainly a more personalized approach might get you a more vetted candidate, and at least sort of the worst offenses will have been detected. Now, we all do need to understand that criminal background checks don't reveal everything. And so people shouldn't rely on them completely. They should still use their gut feeling and all of the other good things that you talk about on your podcast. But at the same time, like it's better than nothing. It's better than nothing. And so it's a place to start. And when we know that, most of these apps aren't even doing that, well, you just, unfortunately, you kind of do have to assume the worst, right? That's why we say you should always meet in public first, et cetera, et cetera. But at the end of the day, and I really do want to emphasize that, it is never the individual's fault when someone else does something bad to them. And there is no foolproof way to detect all offenders, and it's not, it shouldn't have to be the case that you have to hire a PI before you go on a date with someone. And frankly, sometimes even if you did that, there are some things you wouldn't discover. So definitely the wrongdoers are at fault for the wrongdoing, and that's it.
Yeah, and there's this proliferance of people kind of taking it into their own hands. With, you're seeing these Facebook groups pop up about, are we dating the same guy in different cities? And because women are like, you know what, if I can't get this information, easily, then, they kind of, it's not really like man hating. It's more like, hey, any information on this person? Is someone else dating him? Or is anyone married to this person? So that seems to be gaining in popularity too, is like, we'll just take our power back and we'll just talk amongst ourselves. And, because I think a lot of the guys on there, if they are getting away with it, they've become kind of almost like an expert on conning people and
Absolutely.
keeping their secrets safe. Like when I was married, he was on dating apps, but I wasn't on a dating app. Why would I be on? You know what I mean? I feel like most people, their partners, they're married, so they're like, they think, well, I'm not going to peruse Tinder all day long. Like, why should I be on there? I'm assuming my husband or wife is faithful. So, anywho's, good stuff. Okay, so let's move on. So, Elvi's previous relationship was with a man with an alcoholism problem, and she thought that she was ready to date again. She had her head on straight. She had gone to therapy, but then she immediately gets into this 2.5-year toxic relationship with La Petite Douche. So, in your opinion, how do you know when you're ready to date again and in a good space to do that?
Yeah, well, I would say, Elvi did the right things there. It is important after a relationship ends to take the time to heal for yourself and to really think about what that means for you. And so therapy is often a great component to add in that. It's a time for self-reflection. It's a time for reflection on why the relationship didn't work. So both of those things. And so honestly, regardless of why the relationship that ended, you also want to think about, well, what do I want moving forward? What are the ways that I myself was not feeling fulfilled in this relationship? And how would I know that I was fulfilled in those ways moving forward? I would also even go farther as to say, do a self-inventory about what are the ways that I am, I guess the best way to put it is not kind to myself, and work to learn to be kinder to yourself. Because if you believe at some level that you're worthy, or I guess let me say that another way. If you believe at some level that you're unworthy of a certain level of love or respect, then you will tolerate that from other people. I actually pulled a quote for this one. This is from the book, The Four Agreements by the author Don Miguel Ruiz. It's a quote that I've shared so many times with clients, and it is this: the limit of your self-abuse is exactly the limit that you will tolerate from someone else. If someone else abuses you more than you abuse yourself, you will probably walk away from that person. But if someone else abuses you a little less than you abuse yourself, you will probably stay in the relationship and tolerate it endlessly. So if we don't feel as though we're deserving of something more, we will tolerate that from other people. So I think even if you've learned, okay, well, here's what I didn't like in this one relationship, and here's what I'm not willing to tolerate that I learned from this one person, that doesn't mean that somebody else is going to come along that is willing to abuse you in another way and that you're not going to tolerate that. And so you really need to do, I think, a thorough self-inventory and learn what are the areas that I need to develop more self-respect and know what my standards are and how to uphold those standards myself. Because if I'm not willing to uphold them, I can't guarantee that other people would be willing to. I certainly can't rely on the next person I date to hold me and how I should be treated to a higher standard than I myself allow.
Yeah, good point. Like, it's true. Like, she's coming off, an alcoholic guy, but this kind of leads into my next question, because she noticed immediately, which should be a red flag, that that La Petite was on social media and she was reading DMs from women half naked, and instead of saying, oh yeah, big red flag, hard stop, she made excuses. Oh, he took those women off, I'm not following them anymore, I'm not talking to them. And he kind of gaslit her and like flipped it and was like, oh well, the only reason I'm on those DMs is because our sex life isn't quite what it used to be, and kind of blamed it on her, like you're the reason why I'm kind of finding it elsewhere. So it just, sex became this whole issue. And I think she said he's really covert. And so, like, even though from the outside everyone's going, whoa, red flag everywhere, she's like, he was so good at it, he was so kind, my family liked him, and he was great in so many different ways. But then these like underlying things, you don't even realize you're getting it flipped on you. But like by the time she ends up taking him back and sex was an issue, and I think he had asked her for sex, she denied him, she was very tired. She's like, I think I denied him twice or 2 or 3 times in 8 months, and he flipped out. She's like, I've never seen it. He absolutely was like, I am never initiating again, and blah blah blah, and he legit didn't. Is there something underlying? Is this like a control thing? Is this like a power insecurity? Like, I don't know. What is your thoughts on this weird kind of behavior?
We have much to say about that. Irina, you want to go first?
Yes, I'm excited about this.
Sure. So one important concept that we need to introduce here or remind people of is that of DARVO, which is an acronym standing for Deny, Attack, and Reverse Victim and Offender. In short, it's a way that narcissists, when they're called out for their behavior, try to turn the victim into the bad guy. And that confuses the victim, and it also makes her start questioning herself. And all of that results in her stopping focusing on the problematic behavior of the narcissist, which is exactly what he wants. The narcissist's sense of self is so fragile that he can't handle criticism of any sort or rejection, like in the case you were talking about not getting to have sex with someone exactly when he wants and as often as he wants. So he has to stop the rejection and the criticism and prevent it at all costs. So in this example, right, it's like, well, I'm just never going to ask you again if you want to have sex with me. And so then I'm never going to get rejected again. And like, you're going to have to be the pursuer, right? And you did something wrong. And of course, this is all very wrong and very backward. Like, nobody is entitled to sex or to much of anything else, right? If the other person doesn't want to give it, and so it is definitely a control mechanism, and a dangerous one at that, because the narcissist doesn't have a healthy sense of self, and the victim might lose whatever sense of self she has if she continues tolerating this for too long.
Yeah, as Irina said, what they're doing when they're doing this DARVO kind of behavior is they're throwing somebody off. They're making your very valid point off to the side now. It's no longer the point. And now they're saying, focus on me and what my point is. And so where you thought you came in, hey, I have a need, can you address it? Now your need is not as important anymore. Now it's, well, we have to address my more pressing need. And so now the person who thought they were coming in to get their need met is now put in the position of having to defend their own decisions. If the tactic is, well, let's relate it to what you just talked about. So we're not having sex, but it's actually your fault. But sometimes it's what you, Amber, and Athena saw, which is sometimes the offender changes the topic entirely. It's like, well, but now I have cancer. And then you're like, oh my gosh, well, I have to drop everything, because that's obviously much more important than, gosh, I thought my concern was big, but now you're dealing with something so much bigger. And so it can be either of those types, like a direct, I'm going to flip the script on you, or it's just, I'm going to change the subject entirely to something so much huger that we can't be bothered to focus on your issue.
Yeah. And like you say, it's like this kind of diversion. Like, she's asking, why are all these half naked ladies on your Instagram? Why are you giving them attention? And then it just immediately is like, well, it's because of you. And then I don't even think she realized that now she's like, well, let me be better for you. She was telling us, like, I was asking him, like, do you want to do this? Do you want to do that? Like, I'm sitting here bending over backwards, like, oh, we can make this exciting again. And I don't even think she realized that it's like now her power is less because now she's on the defense, like, oh, I'm not a good enough girlfriend. I'm not this and that. And then she just kind of lowered herself or what she's willing to tolerate. And he knows that. And so the rest of their relationship, it's this, you need to meet my standards and divert away from what he was kind of doing on the side, because she had continually catch him with various women he was talking to, and it's crazy.
And that's definitely what I meant earlier about the idea of you have to know what your own standards are and know why they're your standards so that you can't, so that they don't get easily called into question, or does call them into question. You're like, no, your questioning of these is what's off. My standards are there in place for a good reason. And so if I'm not comfortable with you looking at other women's pictures or communicating with them through social media, that's actually a fine boundary for me to have. I had that before you, I would have that regardless of you. I have my reasons for that, and it's not unreasonable for me to have that. And then also, speaking about what's reasonable and not, his whole, well, then I guess I'll never initiate sex again. You can't just say, I'm going to opt out of some normal relationship function. That's just never an acceptable answer. Any standard relationship needs to be attended to by both parties. So that's just no. I mean, you wouldn't accept that in any relationship where I'm the sole person in charge of something that is a vital part of a healthy, functional relationship. Just no. You cannot settle for that.
Yeah. And the crazy part too with him, so he put that back on her for the rest of the relationship. And then when she would seek it out, he would deny her, and he would call her needy and annoying and insecure. So it's like, damned if you do, damned if you don't. But she somehow stayed. It was like so kind of done covertly that I don't think she realized it was even happening until so far down the line. And I don't know if you got to the part in our podcast when I talk about this. It's like a journaling app that I used towards the end. So when I took him back for like 3 weeks, and I started this journaling app because in my head, I was like, I didn't even realize how bad and how toxic my whole relationship was getting for the 5 years. And so when he was diagnosed with borderline, I remember telling myself, like, if this doesn't get better, I have to check out. I have to do this. Like, I have to be strong. I have to do this. And so I got this journaling app, and it basically was like rating your day. I took 5-10 minutes every day. I wrote my feelings out, and being able to read it was so eye-opening because you can go back and see how you rated your day throughout the month. And so had she done something like that, she would see like, wow, in a 2-week span, 10 of the 14 days were red, crap, terrible. And so for me, I needed to see visually like, oh my God, if this is my life, if 80% of my time with him is me crying, me yelling, me fighting, me feeling like crap, I think it's time to go. Like, I can see it visually to help back up my decision, because I remember for the longest time I would say, but maybe I haven't put in all the effort that I need to make this work. Or maybe, I haven't checked all the boxes to ensure that, he got his mental health therapy and I did this, and, everyone's taken care of. And so I don't know. I always think that maybe if people can kind of step away, and if it's not writing it down, if it's, I don't even know, just somehow you're capturing it so you can go back and reflect on it. Or once a month, you can be like, how did my month go? And write it down, or do a pros and cons of, what's working, what's not working, so that you can kind of level set yourself on how this is actually going. Because sometimes you can get stuck going, oh, but we had this really great day, but it's the one day, only one day out of months. And so I'm like weighing so heavily on this one day that it was so great, but then everything else was horrible.
Absolutely. And I have advised clients to do that whole, like, every day, just write, is this, like, I'm thinking about it in the context of should I stay or should I go, right? Stay or go, like, based on if it were just today alone, would I stay or would I go? Is this a green day or a red day? And yeah, you do it every day. And as you said, you look, it's that visual representation can be incredibly helpful to people. And in addition, we know that when you take the time to write something, or even to talk about it, so this could be in therapy, it could be to a friend, or it could just be something you're writing, either writing or talking helps you process the information more deeply than if you're just thinking it. And so that might actually help you get a little unstuck, to move a little forward in your process, to do, and even if it is just something like a yes or a no or a stay or a go. So those can absolutely be helpful tools to help you. And, you know, I would also add in here, this is something Irina and I have seen a lot in the people we've talked to on our podcast, and also in a group we belong to online, that Elvi had really great insight. And one of the things she says here about, she had talked about narcissistic men tending to want impressive women and viewing having that woman on their arm as a conquest, rather than actually liking those personality traits that strong, independent women often have. And that was just such good insight. We have seen that to be true. It really is. Narcissists do like to have an accomplished, impressive person on their arm, you know, more to show to other people, look who likes me, look who wants to be with me, somebody like this. And it really is more about showing them off to somebody else, and that conquest of I could land you, not that I actually value these traits. And so that's, of course, what she saw, is she thought he was into her for her independent, strong nature. And that's why I think she was so disarmed and confused when she tried to be an independent, strong woman, and he did not seem to like it. It took her some time to realize, oh yeah, it's because he doesn't actually like that. He just wanted to demonstrate that he could get that, or to show that off to other people. And she's absolutely right. They don't actually like that.
So Elvi, and this happened to me, because she knew the DMs, she knew the girls on his Instagram, she began obsessively stalking her boyfriend's social media, and she was on dating apps trying to catch him. Can you talk about this pattern of behavior and how it's unhealthy, and how to avoid going down that path where you start kind of getting obsessive and, you know, I don't know. I don't even know how to describe it, but just that, because I would go online, I would stalk, you know, Athena's social media and his ex-girlfriends, and trying to get some information to try to put some puzzle pieces that weren't fitting in place. And so after I left him, I didn't even know what to do myself. I'm like, gosh, I don't need to stalk anybody anymore. I don't need to like go on any social media. It's just crazy when you kind of end the cycle, but you kind of get lost for a second, but it can eat you up. Like, I know several friends that literally check the ex-girlfriend or the ex-wife's social medias on a daily basis. And Elvi kind of fell into that too. Is there any words of wisdom around that?
Yeah, I'd say just because you can doesn't mean you should. And it's about making intentional decisions about, do I feel like this is a good use of my time and of my precious energy, both of which I have a limited amount of. And so, you know, I think it really does boil down to some, I think, self-esteem, but also to trust. And it's obviously understandable if you don't trust somebody off the bat, or only trust them a little as you're getting to know them. I think that's fair. And I think in response to that, if you're still getting to know them and don't know if they're worthy of your trust, then don't give them your trust. You know, that's okay. Don't give them a lot of room to hurt you, or to lie to you, or to disappoint you. And you won't need to be constantly checking up on them. But after a time, if you guys have been together a while, and especially depending on the nature of conversations you might have had about, are we exclusive, or the level of exclusivity we've agreed upon, if you still don't trust them, that's something that really warrants a direct conversation and direct examination. You really need to look at why, what's causing you to doubt them, and to be able to talk to them about, I'm having a hard time trusting you because of this, and what can we do to help with my concerns because of that. And some of it might be a them issue, and some of it might be a you issue. And so some of it is also figuring out, where is this lack of trust coming from? Irina, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And it's interesting, right? Because now with dating apps, the temptations are greater. And this is, again, we're going to reference Nancy Jo Sales here, right? She talks about that, about how that's a problem even once people are in relationships. And so then people might wonder, like, well, is the person still on Tinder, etc., right? So there is statistically, in some sense, maybe a higher risk than there used to be. Okay, so there is a rational component, perhaps, in that sense, just looking at how society is, looking at how easy it is to chat with someone online, and maybe do more than that, or exchange messages on Instagram. But I completely agree with Michelle. Like, usually this comes from somewhere. And when two people are happy and they're spending enough quality time together and like all of these things, when all these things line up, usually there's not reason to be really obsessing about it, especially as time has gone by. So maybe in the beginning you don't really know who you're dealing with, but you know, at some point, unless the behavior changes, now that's a different story, but unless their behavior changes, you know, at some point you're also going to have to take the risk. Like, yes, there is a maybe 1% chance that this person is cheating on you, but you're just going to have to live with that unless you lock them in a cage, right? So, you know, at some
don't
point,
advise that.
right? I mean, at some point, it's just, yeah, that's something
Yeah.
that can happen. And, you know, and there is a small chance that you will not find out about it. But most of the time there's going to be some kind of sign or some kind of issue, like Michelle was saying, and then you have the conversation. And usually these things happen when something else is maybe already problematic in the relationship, right? So maybe this isn't the only thing that's wrong. So yeah, I would go from there.
Yeah. I mean, it could be something from your past. Maybe you got cheated on before, so now you're extra, you know, tuned to that. Or, you know, in my case, I felt like I couldn't just say, I'm done. Something feels off, so I'm breaking up. I needed proof. And so if I could find proof, but then I would need more proof. You know, it's just this horrible cycle. Like, I don't suggest anyone go down it. Like you said, at some point, you just have to give up the reins. And if they're cheating, it will come to light one way or another. Someone's going to contact you. Someone will reach out. Like, you just got to trust in that person. It's if you feel like something's wrong, then exit out. If you feel confident in it, just trust that and see where it goes. It's hard. It's a hard one, and it's a vicious cycle, that's for sure. Now, she also talked about La Petite's black eyes when he'd get angry. What is that? I've never actually heard that before. And the more she talked about it, I was like, oh yeah. She kind of described it as like this blank, empty, evil. I don't know if it's necessarily like their eyes physically got black, but she described it as a black eye thing. So any thoughts or opinions on that?
Yes. So we both were like, okay, I know what she's talking about here, but I don't know if there's like an official term for it. So we both knew a little bit, but I reached out to my optometrist friend about this. So I asked my optometrist friend, Dave, about this. And so it combined what Irina and I were thinking, but also gives a little bit more of the biology that's going on there. So it has to do with the fight or flight reaction that we're also familiar with. And so the fight or flight reaction, it stimulates our sympathetic nervous system in our brain. And that is what directs our body to do various things to help us survive. And one thing it does is, to our eyes, it dilates your pupils to allow you to focus optimally so you can see your threat clearly for survival purposes. Now, if a narcissist perceives what you've done to them as a threat to them getting what they want, you know, to most of us, a threat to getting what I want is not a big deal. But as Irina said earlier, to a narcissist, that's what we call narcissistic injury. They take it very personally. If you don't want to do what they want, they really perceive that as a threat to their sense of self. In fact, as much as narcissists love to present a very self-assured image, they'll be the first to tell you how great they are. It's all a house of cards. They're all actually very fragile, and they will defend that house of cards very vigorously. So if you have said something that has angered them, that has threatened something that's like the way they needed things to go, now they are in fight or flight mode, and they're going to pick fight. And so what they are going to do, their eyes can actually, the pupils of their eyes can actually dilate, get a little bigger. So it's not that they're all black, but they are more black than normal. And the fact that Elvi or any of the rest of us would notice that is also a survival mechanism on the part of the person who is on the receiving end of that angry behavior. It's a survival mechanism for the rest of us to notice signs of danger like that, so that we take them seriously. And so the fact that it seems so pronounced to Elvi or to other people who have commented on their eyes go black, that's their survival instinct of, I need to pay attention to this. This is a sign that I am in danger. Now, what she or anyone else decides to do in response to that fight, flight, or freeze is another option. That's going to be dependent on the person's own background with traumatic threats, with conflict management style, with degree of preparedness or lack thereof. But there really is a biological basis for what she's describing there.
Oh my gosh, that's so profound because I never really thought about it, but the only way I could think to describe RX is just it was like he flipped a switch and he was a different person. And I was like, maybe it's a psychotic break or something. Like it's like they're out of character, so out of character than what I've normally seen. And maybe that goes hand in hand, like when they really get, fired up, it's just like out of body. It's very strange and scary.
I've seen it in at least one person that I believe to be a narcissist, and it is very scary, and it is just a look of like pure fury and hatred is how I would describe it. And it's interesting because when Michelle and I were researching this online to really understand the biological basis better, the other explanation that was given by some people is that this must be demonic possession. Now, I don't tend to believe in such things. I don't know if the two of you do, but it just shows you what the impact is. I think what's interesting about that theory is not that it's accurate, but that it really shows you the impact that it has on the other person and just how scary and how different it is from all the other ways that one knew this person.
Yeah.
It's really
And
striking. Sorry, Emma, it's striking what you said about just your wording about it was out of character for him, which is interesting because if you really think about what you're saying there, it is out of character, out of the character that he was playing. And so it's like the character dropped. He dropped the role for a second. And, I think it's a very common expression, eyes are the windows to the soul.
Yeah.
This idea of we can read a lot in a person's eyes. And I think in those moments, they're dropping what they want you to see in their eyes. And the truth is revealed, the truth that they would not typically want you to see.
Yeah, it's so hard to describe it unless you've witnessed something like that. But typically, I would fight with my ex and I would fight right back. I was pretty on fire and I get riled up. But in probably two of the situations, one when he had trapped me in his house, I couldn't squeak out a word. I was just sitting there watching him and I knew to not say anything because he went to a whole nother place. It was something that was I just, like you said, possessed. He was legit possessed. It felt like that. It felt like empty, like his soul was not there. Like this man was unhinged, which leads me to my kind of last question of all this is she felt that if she didn't get out of there ASAP, that he would have killed her. And we kind of said, well, why did you feel that? And she was like, she kept saying, I felt like it was a Brian Laundrie situation. Or what was the guy who killed the two kids? Not Lacey Peterson. There's another one. Shoot.
Chris
the guy
Watts. It's Chris Watts.
Chris Watts. Like everyone thinks they're a fine human being and then they strangle their wife and children. And she was like, I just knew in my heart of hearts, like he would have snapped like that and he would have killed me. And she ended up fleeing her house amidst wildfires that were happening in California. And she's like, no, he had never done the typical hitting me or like little things that led me to believe that eventually he was going to snap. It was like, no, he was going to do it all the way from zero. Like it would have been, just gone. But she started writing a blog and sharing her experience. She knew that he had started another relationship. And I think there was probably like some part of it, like healing to get it out, kind of what we were doing, just share in this whole situation, what she's learned. I think there might have been a component of hoping that this woman would maybe see it and she could maybe in some way warn her of what she could be signing up for. There seems to be kind of two different buckets of people. They think, let it be in the past, shut up, don't air your dirty laundry. How is this going to affect your family and your kids? And, you're not able to move on if you keep talking about it. And then other people feel like it's cathartic, it's providing closure. What is your stance? Are you in the middle somewhere, or do you kind of lean one way or the other on let it be, or, it's fine as long as maybe you kind of keep it contained in a certain amount of level and not let it consume you? But very curious on this one.
Yes. So I understand why there are two competing trains of thought on this. It actually makes a ton of sense because it really depends on what is your motivation. And so I think it's important to be clear about that. You know, if your motivation is to educate other people or to warn people, that's one type of motivation. If it's for me to move forward, that's another motivation. And they may be in conflict with each other. So I think it's really important as you decide what you want to do about it to be very clear about what is your intended goal and then act in accordance with that. And I also think it's really important if you have supportive people in your life to run your ideas by them, to ask them, people who you trust their opinion and believe would really be looking out for you, to take their input. You don't have to necessarily follow it, but to put it out there to them first, because I think that's it. I think it's very tough when you've been through something yourself and you see the signs of it and you want to save somebody else, whether it's a specific person like the next girlfriend / victim, or whether it is just kind of people in general. And so that motivation is totally understandable, that you'd want to help somebody else avoid the same pain and heartache that you've been through. I can say, unfortunately, most often people, it's not going to go as well as you think, putting it out there if you're trying to put it out for a specific person. Because for a specific person, unless they're in the right mind frame to hear it, they're not going to. And meanwhile, especially if the specific person you're trying to warn is the new girlfriend, you're nobody to them. Whereas their boyfriend is probably love bombing them at the moment. You know, their boyfriend is somebody to them. And so more often than not, if you try to help a specific person by sharing what you know, it's not going to go well. That doesn't necessarily mean you shouldn't for your own peace of mind, but I do think go into it eyes wide open. As far as sharing it more publicly, like what you all are doing with this podcast, what Elvi is doing and sharing her story, what we see in the Are We Dating the Same Guys group, I think that's somewhat different because you're not advising a specific person. You're just putting your experience out there to educate anyone who might come across it at a time where they are willing to learn and take in that information. And then as far as if the motivation is just doing it for you, for your own healing, sure, it might be helpful. You really need to ask yourself about potential consequences as well. I think it is helpful to share your story a lot of the time, but you just need to be mindful that once you put it out there, it's out there. And so if there's any chance that it can reflect poorly on you or embarrass you later or lead you to regret it for whatever reason, it's very hard, if not impossible, to scrub it from the internet. So I just think that's why it's helpful to run it by some friends first. I can't tell you how many times in a group that Irina and I belong to, somebody will be like, I'm about to send this email. Tell me if I should send it or not. And so, you know, we might read the email and be like, yeah, don't send that. It's good that you wrote it. It's good for you to get that out there and we'll provide you the validation, but that's not going to get you the result that you want.
I also have to put my law professor hat on here and mention that victims do need to think through the legal implications before they do that. So even if you're telling the truth 100%, right, even a truthful post could lead to at least to some initial legal harassment that could force somebody to have to take their post down or even hire a lawyer. And so victims are going to unfortunately have to think about whether they have the emotional and the financial resources to take on somebody that might be willing to come after them. Now, that person could get in trouble if they're going to make fraudulent legal claims against you. But you just have to think about whether you are the kind of person that is up for a sometimes righteous battle. And so only you know yourself. And it's unfortunate, right, that victims have to think about that. But we have seen people be victimized with defamation lawsuits that were unfair, and so this is something that you might not want in your life. And, you know, I understand where victims are coming from, and I'm sure we all do, because it's so unfair, right? Like, you're not going to get justice necessarily the way that you should. And, sometimes that attempt to get justice might, just like Michelle was saying, might just keep making things worse. But sometimes if you're strategic and you are careful, you might be able to share that information in the right places with the right people, with a friend of a friend that gets it to the right person, etc. So you just have to really sit down and think about it hard and think about the possible repercussions before you do it, and be ready for that.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes. We actually had our First Amendment rights lawyer on the show a while back because we did get taken to court. And so even though we had all of the evidence, we knew we were telling the truth, like he had some deep pockets, obviously, from embezzling. So he did. And that is a repercussion, because even if you still have to show up to court, and you could go to trial, and you could have to pay that, So especially if you use their real name. So it is something to think about, because narcissists, they don't like to lose. So they absolutely will try to legally bully you. And so, yeah, it's hard to like you said, as far as like, what is your reasonings? What is the outcome? I've had friends, write out some, I don't know if they're nasty emails for the next girl, but it's almost like, are you trying to hurt her relationship by telling her the truth? Or do you genuinely want to protect her from what, what I mean? There's kind of that blurry, like maybe cool down, heal a little bit, and get to a better place instead of like kind of shooting off the hip and throwing out, things. Because like you said, with me, when Athena, talked to me the first time, I didn't have allegiance to her. It's hard being the new person. Like, I don't know you. You're a stranger. There's no trust there. And I've spent all this time with this man who has built my trust, even though he didn't deserve it. But you got to be careful, because you're going to be naturally inclined to the person that you know the most and are in love with, potentially. And it's hard when another woman comes in telling you what to do, or like, what do you want me to break up with him? I just moved here for him. And like, it's very hard. Sometimes people have to come to their own conclusion, and just being there and willing to provide the information when they're ready and want to hear it is maybe a better strategy in some cases too. Any last words on Elvi? Or just dating in general, or sort of, whatever?
I guess I'll say about Elvi, and I would say the same about you, Amber and Athena. Whenever I listen to you women, I just think, I get it, why he's into you guys. You are all amazing, outstanding, intelligent, accomplished women. And so I guess my last words would be, don't doubt those things about yourself. Narcissists and con people can see those things in you just as anyone else can, but it doesn't make it any less true just because of your chance encounter with them. And so, you guys go on being the amazing, accomplished women that you are, and you work to heal from the fact that your paths crossed with somebody who looked to take advantage of that. As Irina said earlier, that's not on you, that's on them.
Thank you.
And really, like Michelle is encouraging people, like, don't settle for breadcrumbs. Like, if you see that there is so much bad and so little good, and you're never going to get that consistent love bombing back that you have in the beginning. You're only going to get treated well when the narcissist is worried that otherwise you're going to leave. And so is this really the push-pull dynamic you want for the rest of your life? If you have children, is this what you want your children to watch and to learn and to maybe reproduce in their own life someday? So I think both for one's own good, but also as role models for children and as role models for friends and for society. Like, we really have to think about, as women, what does it mean? What is the social meaning, and not just the individual meaning, of letting ourselves be treated badly? So I would close with that. And, these women, as Michelle said, as you said, there's so much more than what this one man thinks of them or how he treats them. So you really are way better off alone than with someone like that. Always, always.
Oh, yes, that is the perfect way to end this. I think some people just can't be alone. I think when you finally are able to be alone and not give a shit if someone is your partner, sorry, we have potty mouths on this podcast. You haven't figured that one out. F this and F that and all around. But
I knew I'd be good friends with you guys.
I know,
I was
right?
like, they talk like me.
I was like, my mom hates it. She's like, Amber, like seriously, you sound awful. Please stop. And Athena's mom says the same thing. I was like, but mom, like sometimes that's the best word you can describe it. But I mean, I think if you're okay being alone, like, and just confident in who you are, the right person's going to gravitate to you. And just not try to speed it up, slow it down, just let it organically happen, sorry, and enjoy life, enjoy doing the things that you like to do, and things are going to kind of naturally gravitate. But on the other hand, if it happens, like, it's just, I don't know, my mind is like, yeah, I got 5 years wasted, but at the same time, I came out stronger, smarter, definite learning lesson. I will never repeat that again. So take it for what it is, and open the next door, you know? And so I think it's kind of, your attitude has a lot to say about, you know, dealing with these kind of guys. They sneak up on you and they're pretty good at what they do, but we all have gotten through tough things. And I think we're a testament to that. But, well, thank you so much.
And once again, if you like what you're hearing, please leave us a 5-star review and make sure to join our private Facebook group for even more juicy info. You can also find us on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter. And of course, you can always visit our site at www.xwivesundercover.com.